Good morning. My name is Caleb On, and today I'll be presenting on how entertainment influences people to indifference. Entertainment and technology foster apathy. This should be a truth that is rather intuitive for our generation to grasp. I'm going to ask you a little question. What is your highest screen time ever? Just shout them out. 12 hours, 14 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, 45. Okay. My next question is this. How many of you would say that you are most productive and engaged with reality on that day? Probably none of you. So that's my whole speech right there, right? Entertainment causes apathy just because we're passive when we consume it. Yet beneath this surface layer of time consumption, entertainment more subtly fosters apathy by cultivating intellectual passivity. This should be quite clear just by looking around at the modern West. Information is everywhere. It's at our fingertips. It's on our phones, our computers, and now with ChatGPT, it's even closer. And yet, it seems to me that the general public is slowly losing its ability to think well. Unwisely engaging in screen-based entertainment can cultivate apathy by discouraging critical thinking, yet the Christian should promote thoughtful discourse and meaningful engagement with information. In this presentation, I'm going to begin my argument by establishing the fact that technology influences how we interact with information. In other words, the medium of our technology and the medium by which we get our information matters. From there, I'll assert two things. First, that screen culture, like TVs, smartphones, computers, cultivate apathy necessarily in their nature and in worldview formation. And secondly, the overwhelming amount of information that we receive on a daily basis disconnects information and action, leading to apathy. After that, we will examine how the Christian should engage with technology and information in order to live the flourishing life in obedience to God. So let's begin. Technology influences us. This should not be new information for any of us. We've all sat in Dr. Jonathan Morrow's lectures on technology. What might be new information is that technology influences how we interact with information. For example, print and books and television, they all serve as a medium by which we access information, and a change in that medium means a change in what we see as credible and true. Neil Postman, a famous American technologist, writes that a major new medium changes the structure of discourse. So let's consider an example. In print culture, the common man had to be able to sit down and digest long arguments in printed form. But with the invention of the photograph, we switched from a print-based culture to an image-based culture, and that changed what culture saw as credible. Think about it. We don't say reading is believing. We say seeing is believing. Our interaction with information is influenced by our medium. And now today, we have switched from an image-based culture to a screen-based culture. And that should cause us to ask the question, how does that change how we interact with information? Well, screens encompass all areas of discourse. It's where we go for our entertainment, our news, our politics, and sometimes even our education. And in all those spheres of discourse, what screen culture does is it reduces everything to entertainment. So how does that actually lead to indifference? What I've done so far is establish that information is now viewed as entertainment and passively consumable. From here, there are two ways that it will lead to apathy. The first is an idea studied by those in the Frankfurt School of Thought, if you think back to our critical theory module. These thinkers were fascinated by why the general public was so passive in revolution. Why did the general public not rise up against such an oppressive ruling class? And they concluded that, at least in part, it had to do with the medium of information, the television and the radio, which promoted the listener as simply a passive receptacle. And not only that, it slowly shaped and formed their worldview. Think about our average American teenager who spends 5 hours a day on social media. As he sits there and he consumes, he's not just passive, but his ideas are slowly changing to what's on his screen. And once he has consumed enough, his worldview will be the worldview of his algorithm. The second way that it leads to apathy is that the overflow of information causes a disconnect to action. The constant stream of information that we receive on a daily basis has very little or nothing at all to do with our local context. As a result, what Neil Postman calls our information to action ratio significantly drops. Let me give you an example. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that information was all over our screens. It was on our phones, it was on Twitter, it was on Instagram, it was on our TVs. Every news channel was covering it. We had so much information about the Russian invasion. And yet, what kind of action did we do? Some of us may have put a Ukrainian flag in our Instagram bio. But in terms of real, meaningful action, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we all did nothing. Indifference seems to naturally follow from easily consumable, decontextualized information. How many times have we heard of shootings and of murders and of wars and done nothing about it? We might not say this explicitly in our hearts, but our actions communicate this: it's not happening to me, so why should I care? So if technology has the capacity to reduce us to indifference, how should we respond? Well, the first core principle is quite obvious. We have to remember that we are stewards and that God requires us to be found faithful. Think of the parable of the talents. The master denounces a servant who did nothing at all with what he was entrusted. Christ despises the lukewarm life. Now, at this point in the presentation, I think that it's important to pause and to clarify that entertainment is an intrinsic good. God created us for rest and for leisure. And entertainment is precisely that. It affords us pleasure, amusement, and diversion. As a result, we should not abstain from leisure or entertainment, but rather, as William Powers says, in everything else, seek to enjoy. So now the question becomes, how do we steward this gift well? The first thing is to watch how we ingest information. Scripture is first and foremost here, not only because Scripture is the truth, but because gospel truths are ones that compel us to action. The fact that we should give justice to the weak and fatherless, and that we should maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute should not stay as information. It should not stay as mere knowledge. Now, the local church is closely tied to this, not only because we receive truth in community, not only because we receive truth on a Sunday morning from our pastor, but because the local church provides us an avenue by which we can actually serve. What I'm suggesting is this: we should have a sort of wisdom pyramid in how we consume information. The Bible should be our first layer. The church should be our second layer. Reading actual books should be our third layer. And at the very top of that pyramid, a very small fraction of the pinnacle, should be entertainment and social media. It should be the thing that informs us the least. Now, both the local church and the individual Christian can seek to implement this kind of wisdom pyramid in their lives. The local church can set aside intentional times for deep and thoughtful conversations. The church that I go to right now, Auburn Community Church, I think does this very well. They do this thing called Sunday Night Church, where congregants can submit any kind of question on any kind of topic to the pastor, and the pastor will answer those questions from a biblical worldview. This is the kind of thing that our local church bodies need to be doing to foster deep, thoughtful conversations within the church body. In fact, the church, out of all places, should be the last place to capitulate to culture's idea in creating short and busy forms of content. Now, for the individual Christian, it could look like normal kingdom influence. We should be facilitating conversations with people around us, our coworkers and our classmates. Screen culture, we have come to see this large amount of information as normal. Culture is a thing that we come to see as normal without having to think about it, but we need to think about how we think. And just as a side note, encouraging critical conversations is evangelistic in nature. Because when you're facilitating critical conversations, you're able to propagate the Christian worldview, which is the worldview that makes the most sense out of reality. Core Christian theology reminds us of this, that God created humans with limitations, and he called it very good. The modern influx of information and entertainment and technology simply reflects humanity's insatiable desire for infinite knowledge. Think back to the first temptation. Satan tempted Adam and Eve with a desire to know everything. And I think today's culture, in some ways, is an ode to that original sin. Yet, just as for Adam and Eve in Eden, it remains the same for Christians today. The desire to know everything leads only to grief. And so as we seek to live a fruitful life for God, one that is not marred or interrupted by indifference, we should pray. We should pray along with Moses, "O Lord, would you teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Thank you very much for listening.